This is definitely a dream. So I'm really excited to bring you guys a new style of video this month because it's basically all the best bits of this channel put together. You love the style studies, you love the technique tryouts, and you love the step-by-step tutorials, and I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna kind of smoosh them all together into one series, and I'm gonna call it Iconic. In this series, we're going to take a look at some of our favorite artists, but more specifically, we're going to take a look at some of their very iconic painting techniques, and I'm going to show you how to integrate these into your own painting step by step. Did anyone ask for this series? No. Am I going to make you watch it anyway? Yeah. Are you going to fall in love with it? Absolutely. To kick things off, we're going to start with an artist who is pretty much a staple in every self-taught artist study curriculum, Ahmed Aldoori. Right up there with cynics, Ahmed is an artist that I've watched for so long, and I've learned so much from him, and I'm sure you have too. Yes, I still have him down for a style study, don't even worry, but today I kind of want to focus on one of the most iconic bits of his art, which is that traditionally painterly, oil painty, skin gloss thing. That's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to tell you exactly which colors to use, where to put them, which edges to blend, and which ones to leave hard edge. Trust me, there is a science to it. Plus, I'm going to show you how to take it from looking like a really good digital painting to looking all painterly and traditional feeling. If you enjoyed this video and this new series idea just in general, then please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that cool stuff. And if there are any other iconic techniques you want me to look at, then leave them in a comment below. Also, just a quick hello to all the new viewers that have come in from the Cynic style study. I am still mind blown at the response to that video, but thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I can't wait to share more videos with you. Alright, I hope you're ready, because we're gonna paint some iconic skin in the style of Ahmed Aldoori. Couple of things before we dive in. First of all, we hit 5,000 subs early this week. Man, I don't even have the words to thank you guys with, and I'm so incredibly grateful and excited for us all to become better artists together. Thank you so much. And second of all, if you're watching this on Sunday, which is the day this video comes out, then please take a second to wish my dad happy birthday in the comments, because he reads them and it would just mean the whole world to him. So, okay, let's go. Ahmed Aldoori is a senior concept artist from LA who has worked and taught in the art industry for many years, and some of his notable work involves some really cool character design and concept art for ArenaNet's multiplayer game Guild Wars 2. I could wax poetic about how beautiful his character art is and how he renders his illustrations to look so organic, and how his concept art has so much depth you almost want to drown in it. But I'll save all of that for a style study later. For today, however, I want to focus purely on how he paints skin, because I don't know about you, but when I look at any of Ahmed's paintings, the very first thing I notice is how the skin looks so healthy and glossy and just alive, really. So I spent all weekend studying his art, and by that I mean binge watching his videos. It was for research, I swear. And I think we've done it, boys. We have a 3-step foolproof process for painting that gloss into the skin that will take your portraits from looking like this to looking like this. And trust me when I say this is gonna change your game. So let's dive right in. So the very first thing I noticed in his videos is that Ahmed likes to put down a flat-ish color base, but when it comes to adding form and rendering, the first thing he paints is the actual specular highlight, and then he paints the rest of the face around it. Now there is a technique to the color and location of these highlights, so listen up. First off, you want to pick a specular highlight tone that is the opposite temperature as the skin immediately around it. So if you have warm orange skin, you're going to pick a very pale blue. If you have red skin, like if you have rosy cheeks for instance, you want to pick a really bright green tinted highlight. Secondly, we're going to be very deliberate about where we place these. You want to hit the usual places, tip of the nose, glossy lip, and top of the cheekbone, but Ahmed actually also glosses up a few other places. He places a highlight under the eye right below the inner corner in a front-facing head. In a side-facing head, he'll usually add a second highlight right in the plane where the nose begins. He'll often place one or two highlights at the bridge of the nose, almost directly hitting one corner of the plane shift. So like if you imagine the nose to be a sphere for the nose bulb and a skinny cuboid above it forming the nose bridge, imagine highlighting one of the two edges of the bridge. Now here I started off highlighting one side and then later decided to switch sides, but the concept remains the same. So he sometimes places a highlight right on the corner of the nostrils, most of the times pulling these out towards the cheek. There's often also a highlight at the chin starting under the shadow of the mouth and blending down and out. And finally, he very often has two main highlights on the mouth, one lining the rim of the upper lip and the other in the center of the lower lip, adding gloss. Now we're going to paint around these highlights, bearing in mind that if we really want these highlights to pop, we want to paint the immediate surrounding area to be rather dark and the opposite tone. Just leave the edges of the highlights hard and unblended for now, we'll come back to this in a second. But if you're feeling really ambitious, you can create a whole bunch of hue variation in the skin itself, and then change the hue of the specular highlights to be complementary to the local hue. So if the skin is orange, the highlight is blue, same with red and green or yellow and purple. So with the highlights in place, still hard edged and having painted around it, here's what we have so far. Okay, you guys, I have good news. I think there is a science to which edges Ahmed blends and which ones he leaves as is. But first, there are a couple of highlights you don't want to touch whatsoever. So I'm actually going to create a new layer and specifically replicate two main highlights that we do not want to blend at all. The first one is right at the tip of the nose, and the second is the highlight on the upper lip. We'll come back to these, but for now, I'm going to lock that layer and leave it alone. The too much gene will not win this round. Now, for the question of hard edges versus soft blending, I found that there is one criteria and one criteria alone that determines whether he blends out an edge of the highlight, and that criteria is the plane shift. And this is also why we spent so much time placing these highlights, because one common thread you'll find in all of them is that they lie in areas where they are partly at the edge of a super sharp plane shift, while the other bits lie on a plane that is flat or rounded. And as you can guess, we're gonna leave the edge at the hard plane shift hard as is, but we're gonna blend out the bits that fade into the softer plane on the other side. So with the inner corner of the eye, for instance, there are super hard plane shifts right at the eye socket, which we're gonna leave alone. But as the highlight migrates further down, it starts to enter the cheek area, which is relatively flat. So this is the area we're gonna blend. Same with the nostrils, the corners of the nose are going to be hard plane shifts because it's basically an attachment point for the nostril, but as that highlight grows out onto the cheek, it is once again on a softer, flatter plane. So that outer edge is what we're going to blend. Going down to the chin, the hardest plane shift is right under the mouth where the top of the chin creases, so we leave that hard edge, but as we go further down and the chin blends into the jaw, that is the edge that we soften. With a nose bridge, however, it gets a little tricky because funnily enough, the horizontal plane shift is so sharp that you have a very skinny edge and then immediately flat planes on both sides. So we're going to leave the center fairly opaque and very gently blend out either side. This is around where I realized that I wanted to shift to the other side of the nose bridge, but you get the gist. So we're gonna blend both sides where the highlight blends into either plane, but keep the center nice and opaque. And we're gonna do the same exact thing with the cheekbone highlight as well. Now, just for demonstration purposes, I had gone a little crazy with the highlights here just so you guys could see what I was doing. But after this step, I ended up going back in and making things a little bit more subtle, a little bit more believable for the skin. But here's what we have after step 2. Let's go ahead and finish up the skin. Alright, remember the few little highlights that we had left unblended? It's time to blend them, but not with an actual blender. And this is actually the step that's going to make your painting look all oil painty. This time we're going to use a texture brush. You could use a skin texture brush, but I personally find that that looks a little too refined for our purposes. Instead, we're actually going to use a chunky chalk brush, and using an eyedropper to pick the highlight color, we're basically going to paint a bit of a textured halo around the highlight. Now, the thing to remember with this stuff is you want to keep it restricted to the skin. You don't want to add texture to the eyes or the lips. Why? Because texture reduces the smoothness of a surface. Think about it, shiny surfaces generally have no texture, but matte surfaces do, right? But if we want the skin to look shiny, why would we add texture? Well, for one thing, it's because we do still want it to look like skin. The texture is what adds realism, otherwise it's gonna look like you're painting a plastic mannequin. But secondly, it adds smaller shapes. Skin tends to be vast and soft and diffuse, so a bit of texture really helps balance things out compositionally. You'll see that Ahmed actually uses a lot of textured edges all over his paintings, not just in skin. And I mentioned just now that it gives you that painterly finish. That's because if you look at old paintings on canvas, you'll notice a lot of the times the paintings have textured brush strokes, not necessarily by choice, but it is just a limitation of the medium. Canvas is heavily textured because it's basically a chunky fabric, right? And so when you lay paint on something that's heavily woven, it's gonna basically give you a textured, speckled look, whether you like it or not. Digitally, we don't quite have that issue. We can smooth things out right down to single pixels, but the further into digital art we stray, the less organic our art tends to look. So in order to achieve that painterly look again, we kind of have to DIY it by using textured digital brushes. But you might wonder, why only the highlights? Why not texture everything? Well, first of all, compositional balance. If you texture everything, none of the texture is noticeable. But second of all, think about the consistency of paint. The more you water it down, the more it becomes translucent and the better it blends. But if you want a super bright, opaque highlight with paint, it's gonna have to be dry and undiluted or it's not gonna show up. And dry paint on canvas is just gonna add more texture, and that is why it looks so organic and painterly. These are things that we don't even think about, but they just come to us so naturally, almost as if creativity is like a silent gene in our DNA. Weird. Anyway, you guys can watch me finish up this painting over on Patreon if you like, but for the purposes of this video, I love how the skin texture turned out. See, I told you you'd fall in love with this series. No, but seriously, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and found it helpful, because I for sure have enjoyed this process and found it helpful. If you love this video and want to see some very specific iconic art techniques tried out on this channel, then please come let me know in the comments below, or come tell me on the Discord server, which is probably the quickest way to get to me. As always, if you did enjoy this video, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and all that cool stuff. It really helps the channel out a lot. And if you'd like to support me directly, then please come check out my Patreon for even more exclusive content. The link is in the video description. If through some weird, unlikely twist of fate you've not watched Ahmed's tutorials before, I highly recommend checking him out. The link is in the video description. You can find his channel and you'll learn so much, I promise. And that's all I need to say today. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more tutorials up here and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!